Hello there, and welcome to the third of my videos about the Jubilee lines we never got. In my first video, I talked about Phase 2, which would have taken the line to Fenchurch Street. In the second, I talked about the original Phase 3, which would have gone from Fenchurch Street to Lewisham. These plans were approved in the early 70s with the aim of regenerating East London, which was feeling the effects of the old docks closing. In 1973, the plan for Phase 3 underwent a radical change. The docks were to be redeveloped, and this new line, which at the time was to be called the Fleet Line, you may recall, was going to be a big part of this. The Fleet Line was rerouted to run right through the heart of the docks. From Fenchurch Street, the next station was to have been St Katherine Docks. It's not clear exactly where it would have been located, but I'm going to make an educated guess that it would have been somewhere around where Tower Gateway is now. Next up was Wapping, where it would have met the East London line, now of course part of the Overground. The following station would have been another entirely new one, Surrey Docks North. Interestingly, the previous plans for Phase 3 would have included a station at Surrey Docks, now Surrey Quays. I'm going to advance a theory that this new station would have been roughly where Canada Water is now. And I don't think it's entirely unreasonable to assume that it would have taken the name Canada Water eventually. Then the line would have continued to Millwall on the Isle of Dogs. Actually, this wouldn't have been a million miles from the present-day Canary Wharf station, although the name Millwall isn't quite as whimsical. Next, the line we could have had intersects with the line we got at North Greenwich. Much of this land at the time was derelict industry, which would later provide the site for the O2, or the Millennium Dome as I knew it. Had the Fleet Line been built, there's a pretty good chance that the land would already have been developed long before the millennium, and the government would have had to find a new spot for their poorly thought-out vanity project. Next, Custom House, now a DLR and Elizabeth line station. In the early days of planning, the idea was floated of continuing from here via Beckton, but instead it was decided that the line would have continued to Silvertown, which in those days was a station on the North London line. This station was badly underused in the 1970s, and I wonder if the Underground would have improved matters. Who knows, perhaps the railway station would have closed sooner than it did, with the Fleet Line poaching a lot of its passengers. Certainly, direct underground access would have been attractive to the developers of the London City Airport, yet to be built at the time of the proposal. Next would have been Woolwich Arsenal, where again it would have intersected with the National Rail network. Finally, the proposal took the line to Thamesmead, which was, and at the time of writing still is, very poorly served by rail transport. Depending which version of the proposal you read, it would have had either three stations, namely Thamesmead West, Thamesmead Central and Thamesmead East, or just Thamesmead West and Thamesmead Central, or no stations at all because they discovered that it's geographically not a great place to try and build an underground line. This version of Phase 3 was approved in 1980, but would of course be abandoned. While the idea of a line that was fully integrated with the Underground was considered highly desirable, the government of the time weren't happy with throwing all that money around. 1987 saw the opening of the Docklands Light Railway, which would perform much the same function that the Fleet Line would have done, but cheaper. So when it came to extending the Jubilee Line at the end of the 20th century, a more southerly route was chosen. Still, I think this is one of the more interesting proposed lines we never got, because of how different this part of London could have looked. We most likely wouldn't have got the DLR, Crossrail might have had to take a different route, or not have been built at all. We probably wouldn't have the O2, we might not have Canary Wharf. In fact, there's a solid chance that the area would have been barely recognisable to us. Hi all, hope you enjoyed this wildly speculative episode of Tales from the Tube, and if you did, please hit like. I have one more video on the plans for the Fleet Line, and if you hit subscribe and the bell icon, you can be sure to see it when it arrives. And I'll see you soon for another Tale from the Tube.